Okay, so the number one thing to get going for better FPS is reinstall Windows. Probably not going to like that answer, but that's the truth. 99% of the time, you've got driver errors, registry errors, things get a bit janky. Now, when you do reinstall Windows, there is a program called Windows 10 Debloater. Windows 10 Debloater is a tool that basically gets rid of like Cortana, like OneDrive, a lot of pointless stuff. And there is YouTube videos on how to do it. It's very, very simple. It's called Windows 10 Debloater. Give it a check out. Number two are your startup programs. So when you're playing a game, do you have a load of stuff running in the background to do MS config? These days you can do it through the task manager. So just go into your task manager, you can see the startup tab, and you can see all your programs that are set to start up. You can search by status. The only two I have is my voice meter program, which is for my audio, Cortana, cleaners, Logitech, everything else that's going on Spotify, or it's all disabled. So make sure the programs that you want to start up are the things you actually use. The quick way, obviously, to check what's running is to have a look at your processes, see what's hogging up a load of utility. And you're probably going to hate me for this, but drivers in games kind of fall into the same category. You've tweaked graphic settings, you've tweaked config files, you've tweaked a load of stuff, and you messed about with it. Best thing you can do is uninstall the game completely, often going into that game's folder and removing some of the old files and reinstalling. DDU is a program called Display Driver Uninstaller. Is effectively the best program for uninstalling your old drivers. To remove your drivers, you would go ahead and open DDU, extract it to your desktop, run the program, select graphics card, NVIDIA, and you would click clean and restart. And then it will relaunch you into your desktop and go to your downloads where you've downloaded the most recent driver. Right click, run as admin. I always recommend running everything as admin. That's another tip. Whether that be a game, a program, an application, anything that can be run as admin, you should be doing. Go into Modern Warfare, scroll down the launcher, properties, right click, compatibility, run this program as admin. Each program you use a lot and frequently, go ahead and do this. It just makes everything easier. Go ahead and you will run the driver and it will freshly install, and then you've got your drivers. Once your drivers are installed, you can go to your control panel, adjust image with preview, choose advanced 3D image, and then go to manage 3D settings. 1, prefer maximum performance. Number 2, you want to put the texture filtering to performance. Number 3, if you're running G-Sync, the correct way to do it is to put V-Sync on and cap your frame rate 3 below the refresh rate of your monitor. So I'd set my max frame rate to 162 because that's 3 below my maximum refresh rate that my monitor can produce. That's how you use G-Sync. If you're not using G-Sync and you just want to run max frame rate as high as it can go, turn off V-Sync, turn off max frame rate. You're good to go. Make sure you're running the resolution you want to be running and the refresh rate. Important. So go to power plan, choose a power plan, and you can see here there are different options. If you choose ultimate performance, this will basically mean that your display in PC is not going to go to sleep. If you click change advanced power settings, it's basically going to give the computer as much juice as possible. Now, if you're running a certain type of processor that is struggling to downclock, what I mean by this is when you're running programs and it's not really dropping down to stock speeds because it's consistently boosting, you can go ahead and you can go into the power management of the processor and select the minimum state. Now this, you can whack this to 100 so that it's always going to be fully ready to utilize 100% of the processor whenever it needs to. But I like to set it to 0 so it will effectively downclock. Now, when it comes to overclocking, there are tools to do it. You can go ahead and you can download MSI Afterburner. The problem with this is when you're doing this, this can bring in instability. The same with a processor overclock, a curve optimizer. If these words mean nothing to you, then just ignore it. The reason you're getting poor frame rates or unstable frame rates is not because your GPU isn't cranked up to the sun. It's not because you're running 4.2 gigahertz when you could be running 4.4. If you leave everything at stock, you should still be able to get steady, stable frame rates that are enjoyable to play. Imagine this is RAM. This is an SSD, but once you go ahead and you get your RAM, you might have bought 3600, 3200 DDR4, it doesn't mean it's running at 3200 megahertz. You need to go into your BIOS and then you can turn on XMP. XMP basically lets your RAM run at the full speed it can do. If you're on a Zen 3 processor, a Zen 2 processor, basically a Ryzen, without being overcomplicated, you want your fabric clock to be half of what the RAM is. So if your RAM is 3600, you want your fabric clock to be 1800. Now XMP will do this automatically, but just make sure. Now, when we spoke about capping frame rate inside of the control panel, there is another way to do it. MSI comes with a program called Riva Tuner, and Riva Tuner allows you to cap the frame rate of each program individually. Okay, so what this means is if you go to add a program, you find where your game is and you add the launcher, and it appears here. Now all of a sudden, if you set your application detection to be medium, in here you can cap your frame rate to be 162. So I prefer to cap it using Riva Tuner rather than the NVIDIA software because I find this is a bit more stable. Next, you want to go to game bar. Just go to settings, gaming, game mode, on off, game bar. You can set that also to on off. Captures, I don't have it capturing anything in the background, so I turn all of this capturing stuff off. Okay, so you've got everything set up, everything's running sweet. Now you're going to go onto your desktop and press Alt-Z. This brings up GeForce Experience. To note, if you go into the cog wheel and you go to recordings, I choose to record the gameplay to a separate drive that is not running my game. It helps smoothness. If you've got that option, use it. You can set it by clicking this little tool here. When you go to these two options, Instant Replay is going to allow you, if you press Alt F10, to capture the last 3 to 4 minutes of gameplay. If you're not going to be sharing gameplay and you're not like a Let's Player or something, and you don't share footage, turn this off. You'll save yourself a few frames. Game filters are a thing that allow you to tweak visibility in games, make it look cool or make people look more visible in competitive. If you're not going to be using them, don't have them on. They really do kill FPS. These can take 10 to 30 FPS depending. Okay, so I know when people watch these FPS videos, they're always suggesting you to download things, and you end up with a ton of bloatware. This program isn't bloatware, and it's probably the only one I'm going to recommend you to download. It's called Process Lasso. Now this looks a bit complicated. You load it up and you think, wow, what is this? The long and short of this program is it allows you to set constants for programs and rules. So when I go to my active processes and I look at what is available, you can click the program, right click, and you can set the affinity. The affinity is how many cores it runs on, and the priority is the priority of the processor. Some games aren't set properly, even though they should be. Modern Warfare, for example, was set to be below normal, and I don't know why. So what I now do is I use this program to just set basic rules. Like my streaming program, I want it to be always normal usage. A video game, I right click, I want it to be always normal usage. Maybe you even want to set it above normal if it's like the only thing you're using. What I've used this program for and why I think it's really good is if you have a higher core count processor or you have a little bit of extra headroom, you can do the following. You can take a game, let's say Adobe Premiere Pro is the game, right? I can grab this program and I can right click the program and I can say, hello, I want you to run always select CPU affinity on the back 10 cores. And then I can grab, say, Modern Warfare, and I can say to you, hello, select CPU affinity and unclick, and say you run on the first 8 to 10 cores and threads. So what this means is the game is being played on its own. It's not affected by streaming or anything else, and the streaming program is not affected by anything else. What this has also allowed me to do is grab all of the little programs, like say Spotify. Spotify, for example, I chuck on a random core and thread because I don't want this interrupting with the game. and it can go on the back end because it's such a light program. The same with Discord, the same with a client, these kind of things. So what this has allowed me to do is push my junkware, my Spotify, Discord, Chrome tabs to the back end of the processor, and the main 1 to 10 cores are getting the game. So that is pretty useful. And I've found it to be a very, very good program. Now, if you think that this is a bit too complex for you, and I understand that, then don't mess with it too much. You can just use it to check that the CPU priority is of the correct value. If you want it to be set for this session, just do the current. If you want it to always follow this rule, you can set it to always be above, normal, below, etc. 2560 by 1440, which is 1440p. Now, to note, playing in a lower resolution doesn't always mean higher frame rates, so bear that in mind. It may need some testing on your part. I'll give you an example. StarCraft 2 is a game that uses only really 2 cores. Because of that, if you put this game in 4K, it uses your graphics card so much more that the performance you're getting from the graphics card actually beats out 2 modern processor cores. So in that game, playing on a higher resolution gives you higher frame rate. So the way you would do it is big resolution, low graphics, more frames. So I can't sit here and give you the exact settings you need. That comes with experimenting. Some guides would say, put everything on low, put everything on 1080p, and you'll get more frames. That's not always the case. So those are some tips that really should help clean up your PC, get your PC running better, and in general get all of your games running. I'm now going to give you a few tips that will help just Modern Warfare Warzone, because that's such a popular game. But in general, this should be the way that you set things up for any game going forwards, and I hope that helps, because it really helps smooth my gameplay out. And it doesn't matter that I've got a super good PC. I was struggling with low frame rates, because if you don't have everything quite set up right, there are just problems that happen. Even if your frame rate is going to 200, if it's occasionally touching 200, but most of the time you're playing at 150, it's going to feel horrible to go from 200 to 150, because you're going to feel that big drop. So you want to cap your frame rate to a frame rate that you can achieve like 90% of the time. And you go to your cog here where it says play, and you go to modify install. What you can also do here is get rid of the stuff you don't want. That always helps clean up your install folder. If you don't want campaign or multiplayer and you only play Warzone, just get rid of that. So for players, this advanced options ini has the ability to be changed and tweaked if you've ever messed with your settings. So what you can just do is delete it. When you restart the game, it will make a new folder, and you can set your render work account to the amount of physical cores that your processor has. So mine in this case would be 16. And you can set your memory scale to 0.6. So you hit save, and the options of say Warzone, you can go to this cogwheel here, game settings, and the app itself, you can say that once this game launches, exit BattleNet completely. You don't want BattleNet to launch when you start your computer. What to note is this goes for all games. Field of view is how much is rendered on screen. If you crank this all the way up, you're going to see more and it's going to render more. So if you find that you're having really bad frame rates and you're on max FOV, maybe turn it down. So here, make sure always that it's selected your actual GPU. Your render resolution. Now, here's where some people get a bit confused. 1080p is CPU bound, because at 1080p, it just cannot use the full power of your graphics card. So if you have a 3080, a 3090, or some high-powered graphics card, and you're playing on 1080p, you're then going to be CPU limited. When you go up in resolution, it uses more and more of the graphics card and less of the CPU. So 1440p is a nice round point. Frame rate, you can just set it to unlimited if you want. You can set it to custom and have just a menu frame rate cap. That way, when you're in the menu, it's not churning away. However, I don't really like doing multiple frame rate caps, so I just leave it on unlimited and let RivaTuner handle it. If you've got a GPU that's possible to do this, leave it on enable plus boost. Streaming quality and texture. I put filtering on high. You can enable this. Bullet impact and sprays have no impact on performance. Tessellation, if you want total performance, you can turn this off, but it is going to look a lot worse. Shadow map, you can chuck this on low. I think normal looks better and it's not too impactful. I think the difference between going from low to normal isn't worth the visual hit. It's not like you get 50 more frames, but it really depends on your system. Most of the time you're going to be turning everything down for the most frames. Ambient occlusion, I found that between static and dynamic, they're the same frame rate. Having them on both looks so much better, and I'm not getting infinite more frames than when I have it off. So as somebody that streams and records, I leave it on for the viewers so it looks nice. I would recommend turning this off if you're just playing for pure frame rate. Filmic strength on 0. DLSS, if you're able to do this, this basically uses AI sampling to play the game at a lower resolution and then bump it up to a higher resolution. You can't really tell the difference if you put it on quality, and you do get better frames. I don't ever have motion blur on, and that's really it. And previously, before doing all of these tweaks, my game was a big mess. It was a big stuttering mess, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. It should help you in good stead for playing any single game at good frame rate. And yeah, don't forget, I am capping my frame rate to 162, so it won't go above that. But for playing and streaming and recording, you can see that in the top left, we are at 160, 150, 160, 150. And I don't have all my settings on low. This isn't like the lowest it will go. And yeah, I do have a really, really good PC. There's no two doubts about that. But there will be countless people in the comments that also have really good PCs and something's just not running right for them. So yeah, I decided that I would throw this guide up and talk you through all of the things that I did to help improve that frame rate. And now pretty much the start of the game where everyone's loaded in, every single person's in the game, everyone's dropping, actions happening. This is kind of some of the lowest frame rates you're going to see. And it's gone from being this like game that would go to 90 frames, it would be like 90, 100, sometimes 70, to being this completely enjoyable, smooth experience, right? What I could do is I could not stream, cap my frame rate to 120, and sit at a locked 120 all the time. Now, some of the pro streamers are going to show you that they get 200 FPS, 300 FPS. If I play on 1080p and I chuck everything on low and I overclock my CPU to the highest it can go and I absolutely run it like stink, yeah, I can hit those frame rates. But that doesn't mean it's actually running better. That's the thing. It's about smoothness. A solid permanent 160 is better than 250 frame rate suddenly going to 130 when everything kicks off. So you can see the game is completely smooth. I'm playing in 1080p. I'm rendering in slow, X264 slow. And it's a really enjoyable experience. And remember, it's not going above like the 160 frame rate because I'm capping it. If you've got anything else you want to ask me, do leave a comment. Consider subscribing. But hopefully those tips help you out. All right. Peace.